CELA presents All About CELA Orientation Webinar for Public Library Staff.
Okie doke. I think we'll get started. So again, my name is Faylene Bobier. I'm the Training and Outreach Coordinator with CELA Member Services, and I'll be presenting today's webinar all about CELA, CELA orientation for public library staff. So welcome, everybody. So this webinar is intended to give library staff an overview of what services are available to you and your patrons through your CELA membership. So I'm just going to start, and I'm turning off my video so we can concentrate on the PowerPoint. I'd like to start just by reading a brief land acknowledgement. So I currently live and work in Toronto, which is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. This territory is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. And I think wherever we find ourselves today across Turtle Island, we can be grateful to the First Nations for their careful stewardship of the land. So in terms of an agenda, this is what we're going to try and look at today. We'll review what CELA is, the roles that public libraries play in offering the service. Next, I'll be covering eligibility requirements and the types of accounts that exist for patrons, but also for those who are supporting them. Following this, we'll spend some time on our collections, formats, and services, and then we'll talk briefly about the registration process. At the end of the webinar, I'll try and put all the information that you learned into perspective by discussing different ways that you might be able to integrate CELA at your library to welcome your patrons with print disabilities. So what to expect in the webinar and maybe not what not to expect. So the purpose of the orientation webinar is to give you an introduction to how you can offer CELA at your libraries. So in terms of setting expectations, I just want to highlight that we're only going to be reviewing the main aspects of CELA's collections and services. I encourage you to explore the many tutorials, videos, and webinar recordings that go into a lot more detail about our formats, how to use the apps and devices that play CELA books, and many other topics. And there are specific webinars, for example, that deal with each of the devices that patrons and libraries can use to listen to CELA books. We also offer 2 learning paths with our webinar offerings. If you're interested in following a sort of curated set of webinar recordings and videos to match the level of knowledge that you need about CELA in whatever role you play at your library. So very briefly, I'm sure most of you are probably familiar with CELA. What is it? It stands for the Center for Equitable Library Access. It's a free library service that's offered via the public library system in Canada. CELA is a comprehensive, accessible library service, so currently providing over 1.5 million books, magazines, and newspapers to people with print disabilities living in Canada. CELA is a national not-for-profit organization whose aim is to provide accessible reading services to the approximately 5 million people across Canada who have a print disability. And our mission, since CELA is a service provided via the public library system, part of our mission is to support public libraries in the provision of accessible library collections and to champion the fundamental right of people living in Canada with print disabilities to access media and reading materials in the format of their choice. So this is what we'll be trying to break down in the webinar. In terms of eligibility for CELA service, there's a clause in the Canadian Copyright Act that defines what they call perceptual disability, which I'm mostly going to refer to as print disabilities. So a print disability, if you read this section in the Canadian Copyright Act, is a disability that prevents or inhibits a person from reading a literary, musical, dramatic, or artistic work in its original format. So Section 32 of the Copyright Act specifies that organizations like CELA are able to produce and make available alternate format materials. So the types of disabilities that we're talking about include visual disabilities that might result in blindness or partial sight, to physical disabilities that can affect holding or turning the pages of a print book, conditions such as severe arthritis, cerebral palsy, MS, or any condition that affects the fine motor skills. The third kind of print disability that's referred to in the Copyright Act, uh, they call them perceptual disabilities or an impairment relating to comprehension. So this would refer to learning disabilities such as dyslexia, as well as to some forms of autism and brain injuries. In general, CELA doesn't use the term perceptual disability since our collection is intended specifically to make print materials accessible and doesn't address the needs of people who are deaf or hard of hearing, which is also a category that's covered in this exception. People who have temporary print disabilities can also access CELA service at your library while they're experiencing the temporary disability. So it could be, for example, a person who's waiting for cataract surgery, but they can't see well enough to read print while they're waiting, or someone who's undergoing regular chemo or kidney dialysis treatments and they're not strong enough to hold or turn the pages of print books during the period that they're undergoing treatment. The other thing to know about accessing CELA resources for your patrons, CELA doesn't require a proof of disability form or a medical certificate. There is a section in the online registration form where the person is asked to identify that they do have a print disability, that is, a learning, physical, or visual disability that prevents them from reading regular print. And this is sufficient to give them access to CELA's collection. However, I do want to mention right at the top that CELA does give access to another collection, which is the Bookshare collection. So patrons and educators are able also to access Bookshare titles at celalibrary.ca. For people who aren't familiar with it, Bookshare is a US-based online library of digital accessible formats for people with print disabilities. It's the largest library of its kind in the world. Bookshare operates under US copyright law, and in order for patrons to access Bookshare titles at celalibrary.ca, they do need to provide a signed proof of disability form required by Bookshare, which is available on the CELA website. Bookshare is an optional service, so patrons who don't want to provide the Bookshare POD will obviously still have access to any of CELA's online and or physical resources. Bookshare is also mentioned if you're registering a patron when you're going through the registration form. You can download a copy of the proof of disability if the patron has it right there and email it to us or print a copy and give a copy to your patron to complete and upload. But they can decide to add the proof of disability to their account at any time after they're registered. So it doesn't have to happen when you're actually registering the person. So who can access CELA's collection? We aim to remove barriers by not only giving CELA accounts to people or individuals with print disabilities, but also to those who support them. So regardless of the type of account that the person is requesting, they do have to provide their public library card number to register and complete a registration form. Starting out with public libraries like yours that are already CELA members, all CELA member libraries have a CELA account, and I'm going to be looking at this in more detail shortly. We also have something called an educator access account. This is for educators at all levels, elementary, secondary, and post-secondary. The educator access account gives them free access to CELA and Bookshare resources once they've completed Bookshare's educator terms of use form. So it gives them access to both physical and online formats to be used by their students with print disabilities. Then there's another account called the Client Access Support account. This account is intended for professionals other than teachers at public institutions who help individuals with print disabilities to access library service. So this could include people such as recreational and rehabilitation therapists, private tutors, workers at long-term care facilities, etc. It's important to note that people with the client access support account are unable to access titles in Bookshare's collection. And also that as a public library staff person, you will not be able to access Bookshare titles. This has to do with Bookshare's permissions, although of course you will be able to see all the titles in our collection, including Bookshare titles, and definitely you would be able to assist a patron if they needed help uh, in getting books from Bookshare. So I just want to review the roles that public libraries take in terms of offering CELA at your library. There was a 2023 study called Is Your Public Library Accessible? And participants with disabilities identified that staff knowledge of their local accessible services significantly impacted the patron experience for the better, which is probably not surprising to any of you. This finding also applies to what you should know about CELA. So using your main CELA account that I mentioned in the previous slide, you can use it in various ways to register your patrons for their own independent CELA accounts. You can borrow physical or online formats from CELA's collection. You can also access statistics on your CELA service through your main CELA account. For example, the number of patrons registered for CELA at your library. You can also access circulation statistics for both the library itself as well as for patrons who have registered for CELA through your library. We also encourage libraries to promote CELA service in your community, and we offer free promotional materials for public libraries that I will be mentioning again a bit later. So now I'm going to talk about our collection. So when I talk about accessible formats, what do I mean? What do we offer? How can you and your patrons choose titles? Before we look at that, I just wanted to share this quote with you from a grandmother who uses CELA and who expressed her appreciation to us for having books in accessible formats. So she wrote, having been legally blind for 3 years now has been a hardship that has many times discouraged and frustrated me. This service has been a game changer, as the most important thing for me is to enjoy reading books with my 11-year-old granddaughter, Olivia. And we're lucky at CELA that we frequently get notes like this. These kind of comments help us to understand what it means for people with print disabilities to have free access to CELA books and other resources via their public library. So, just in terms of collections and what's available through CELA, currently you have access to over 1.5 million items through both CELA and Bookshare collections. It's a collection that has books for all ages and a wide range of interests. It includes access to audiobooks, magazines, and newspapers in various formats, so e-text or electronic text, braille, and audio. Our collection is bilingual, so CELA has materials in both French and English. You'll also discover reading materials for all ages and interests, including fiction and nonfiction titles by Canadian, Indigenous, and other best-selling authors, as well as popular reading genres, hopefully to satisfy a wide variety of reading tastes. For patrons and educators, Bookshare offers a wide selection of books in languages other than English and French, and also provides some books by academic publishers. The collection and scope and size of our collection is probably similar to what you might find in a mid-sized public library. We regularly add new books so readers can find the latest titles in the formats they need. And if we don't have a title that you or one of your patrons is looking for, we really encourage you to let us know by completing our title suggestion form, which is on the main page of the CELA website. We can't guarantee that we'll add all suggestions, but definitely we do our best to see if we can find the title and acquire it or produce it for our library in the format of choice. CELA also partners with organizations that administer many of Canada's literary awards and reading programs, and we try to include as many of the selected titles in our collection as we can so that patrons can read them in accessible formats at the same time as the prizes are announced. Some of the awards and programs that we support are Canada Reads, First Nations Community Reads, the TD Summer Reading Club, Hackmatack, award-winning titles in the Atlantic provinces, and more. So as library staff, you can look to us to support your accessible programming and your book clubs. Individual patrons and member libraries can request titles by going to celalibrary.ca, logging into their accounts, and selecting the title and format they need. Public libraries can order multiple copies of a title for a community reads program or a book club. CELA patrons can call or email our contact center. We have a toll-free number if they need to request book titles. If you're looking at audio books, those will depend on what technology you're using to read those books. So, for example, Regina Public Library in Saskatchewan runs an accessible book club that they've been doing for quite a few years. And they've recently purchased a number of Envoy Connect devices, which are relatively new audiobook players that are fairly inexpensive. So using their CELA account, they can basically add audiobooks to those Envoy Connect devices and then lend them out to patrons. If you're requiring a physical Braille book from us, we strongly recommend that you order the book 4 to 6 weeks before you might need it. If you're using it for a book club, for example, to allow time for delivery by Canada Post and for reading. So patrons with print disabilities, like other patrons, are probably interested in reading magazines and newspapers in accessible formats to keep up with current events and news. So we do have a newspaper database, which has both English and French papers. Um, so the newspapers are not audio files, they're text files, and they're text versions without photographs or advertisements, which makes them easier to read for people who are using screen readers like JAWS. So we have national, some regional and international newspapers. So as I said, the newspapers would be read on an internet browser, and patrons might use accessible technology like a screen reader like JAWS to read the content. Our newspapers are updated daily or according to whatever their print publication schedule is. We also have magazines available. We have some audio magazines read with human voice narration. These are mostly Canadian titles that are available to download on various devices. We also have a larger number of popular e-text or electronic text magazine titles that can be read on various devices, on reading apps, or other devices that we'll be talking about. Patrons can also subscribe to the magazine so that they automatically receive the most recent issue of whatever magazine it is they're looking for. So, how do patrons choose titles? Probably the most popular way is through what's called automatic selection. This is where books are selected by CELA's system based on reading genres chosen by the patron. So the patron will have a conversation with one of our staff at CELA's contact center to talk about what format, how often, the number of titles they'd like to receive, etc. Automatic selection is offered for audiobooks through what's called direct to player, which is a delivery method that basically adds a book directly from CELA's website to either the Easy Reader app, which is an accessible reading app, or to a configured Daisy player. You can also get automatic selection for Braille and print Braille books. Titles in the Bookshare collection aren't available through automatic selection, but patrons can either request those independently through their own CELA account through our website, or they can get in touch with the contact center by phone or email. Patrons and libraries can choose books on their own by logging into celalibrary.ca and selecting the format they need. Again, that will depend on the device that they're using to read or to access CELA books. And for people, if you have patrons who don't use a computer or who prefer not to use CELA's website, they can always call or email in their book choices to CELA's contact center. So, I know this is a lot of information. I hope you're getting something out of this. I just wanted to remind you, if you do have questions or comments, you can put them into the chat and I'll address them at the end of the presentation. So accessible formats. So I've been talking about accessible formats. So what do I mean by that, and what formats are available from CELA? So CELA's audiobooks, I'm just going to take some water here, are in a format that's called DAISY, which stands for Digital Accessible Information System. DAISY is an accessible audiobook standard that enhances the navigation possibilities in an audio or an e-text book. So by reading a DAISY book on a DAISY reading app, such as Easy Reader, or on a DAISY player, it's possible to move directly to specific parts of the book. So you can move back and forwards by chapter, by section, by page. DAISY books can be downloaded to various devices depending on the patron's technological needs and preferences. CELA also has Braille books. So Braille readers can enjoy a wide collection of Braille titles, either as embossed physical Braille copies that we would send out via Canada Post, or they can also download electronic e-Braille files if they have a Braille display, which is what they would need to read electronic Braille. Libraries can also order embossed hard copy Braille if they're wanting to order Braille books either for a specific patron or as part of an outreach event that they're doing. We then have a smaller collection of what's called print Braille books. These books are children's picture books with the text brailled onto clear plastic sheets and interleaved into the book. So you have both the print text and then a plastic braille page in between. So this allows a sighted, for a sighted and a blind reader to enjoy a book together. Print Braille is an excellent format to support early Braille and literacy skills in blind children. We also have books available in e-text or electronic text. Again, these books would also be downloaded to different devices. You would have the text and the audio together with synthetic voice if you use an app like Easy Reader. So this can be useful, particularly for people who have learning disabilities such as dyslexia. It makes it easier to read if they can both follow along with the print text and hear it spoken at the same time. So the different file formats for e-text books would be DAISY Text, EPUB, and Microsoft Word files. We do ask that our files be deleted off the device after the person is done with them. So in terms of, at your library, if you're thinking about specific patrons, probably the first thing to figure out is how is the patron going to be reading the reading CELA resources? So do they have a tablet, phone, or a computer? So I'm going to review how to get books according to the technology that your library loans out or that your patron owns. I'll cover the main apps and reading devices that our patrons use, but this list is by no means exhaustive. We're continually looking for new delivery options to meet trending technologies. For example, something we recently introduced is the Amazon Alexa smart speaker, which works with CELA's collection. For now, though, I'm just going to describe how to use our materials using tablets, smartphones, or computers or laptops. So there are several accessible book reading apps that you and your patrons can use. The app that works with our direct-to-player service is called Easy Reader. It's available for Apple and Android devices as well as on desktops or laptops. The app is free and you and your patrons can search our catalog on the app and add books and magazines to the bookshelf. If you or your patrons select books using our website, we recommend selecting the direct to player format. So every time you look for a book in CELA's collection, you'll get a drop-down menu that will ask you to choose the format that you want. And if you're looking for any audiobooks, most of the time that's going to be direct to player format because this simply loads the book straight onto the app or other device that you're using. You can also access our books and magazines as zip files for Daisy Audio, several e-text formats, and electronic braille files. Using the zip file gives you the option to transfer the book onto a USB or an SD card and add it to a different device, which some libraries are doing. It also lets you read our books on many different apps, including the VoiceStream app, Google Read and Write, plus many more. Another way to listen to CELA books is the relatively new Envoy Connect device. So Envoy Connect is an easy to use, portable, and maybe more affordable option for reading accessible audiobooks. Patrons can mail their device to CELA to post free to be reloaded with new titles, or the device can be reloaded by downloading books or magazines directly from the patron's direct-to-player bookshelf with a free software that they can get on their computer, which is called CELA Connect. And some users choose to do both. So they might mail in a device and then have another device at home that they continue to use. Public libraries can also purchase Envoy Connect devices and load books from the library CELA account in order to lend them out to patrons. It seems like this option is becoming more popular with libraries who are looking for newer and less expensive ways to offer reading devices to patrons. Another possibility is that your patron owns a Daisy player. And some of you might be familiar with the Humanware Victor Stratus or the Victor Stream players. You may even loan them to your patrons. The Stratus player is the one on the right, and it has large buttons. It was designed for blind and low vision users because of its durable and accessible features. The Victor Stream is the smaller device, the one on the left, more portable. It's a handheld player, but both models will play Daisy audio and text and can be configured to connect to a local Wi-Fi connection. So the books again are loaded straight onto the player from the patrons or the library's direct-to-player bookshelf. If you do want to set up direct-to-player service on a Daisy player, or maybe you have more than one, all you need to do is contact us at CELA Member Services. And I mentioned this relatively newer option. Uh, it's called the Accessible Reading Canada skill. It was recently launched. So it's a voice-activated application that lets CELA users listen to human-narrated CELA audiobooks through Alexa-enabled smart speakers. Users must have an Amazon account as well as an Alexa-enabled smart speaker to use this app. Through this Alexa app, which is called a skill, patrons can use voice commands to search, browse, and listen to audiobooks from CELA. And of course, libraries also have the option of loaning out Alexa smart speakers so that patrons with print disabilities can try the Accessible Reading Canada skill before purchasing their own device. There are instructions on the CELA website that provide guidance for libraries who are interested in offering this service, including what patrons need to get started and some tips for supporting patrons. So I'm now going to play a very short audio demo of a CELA staff member, Iwana, who's opening the app, using the menu options such as resuming a book and going through the player options.
Start Accessible Reading Canada.
Would you like to resume your most recent book in progress, access your books, or browse the library?
Resume.
Coming Together as Things Fall Apart by Astra Taylor. Narrated by Rebecca Mitchell.
Next.
Meanwhile, in the U.S.,
Next.
Chapter 2. Barons or Commoners?
Previous.
Meanwhile, in the U.S.,
Volume up.
opined, for a long time now, people...
Stop. Start Accessible Reading Canada and Bookshelf.
You have 4 books on your bookshelf. First book, The Divine Comedy, by Dante Alighieri. Would you like to start reading or skip to the next book?
Help.
Your bookshelf is a list of books that you have chosen from our website or that have been selected for you based on your preferences. You can find them on the CELA website by selecting the direct player option for any audiobook. To navigate between the books on your bookshelf, say Previous or Next. To return to the main menu, say Main Menu.
Stop.
Got it. Goodbye.
So that's just a little sort of preview of how the smart speaker works, the Accessible Canada reading skill. In terms of mailing out physical books, the only physical items that CELA now sends out are either embossed braille. So on the left there, you see some embossed braille. These are shipped out in cardboard boxes, and the patron or the library can keep or recycle those embossed braille books. They do not need to be sent back to CELA. Then we have a print braille collection. Those are the children's picture books where you have the print text and the pictures, as well as a plastic braille page in between. Those are sent out post-free in a bag like the one you can see on the screen there. Patrons and libraries have those on loan for 6 weeks, but those must be returned to CELA. And if you look at the address card, all you need to do is flip it over, and then you can drop it in any mailbox, no postage required. But those are the only physical items that would be sent out from CELA. All of our other formats would be downloaded to whatever device the patron is using. So in terms of registering eligible patrons, which is one place where the public library definitely has a role to play, there are basically 2 ways that a person can register for CELA. They can do it independently there's a self-registration form on the CELA website, or a library staff person can register them by logging into your CELA account. Normally, the registration process, if it's done at the library, should take between 10 to 15 minutes. So it involves you as a library staff person logging into your CELA account, choosing the patron registration for use by public library staff link, and completing the online registration form. So on the form, you're going to include the person's contact information, indicate what formats they read in, and whether they want online or physical delivery of books. So for example, if they're getting physical delivery of Braille books. There's also a space to add designate information. Sometimes the person might want a family member, a friend, or sometimes it's even a library staff person who will be their designate and help them to manage their CELA service. If the patron doesn't have this information when they're completing the registration form with you, that's fine. It can be added once the patron is registered by having them get in touch with CELA's contact center who will update their CELA account. We also have a special arrangement with Vision Loss Rehabilitation Canada, which is a partner organization of CNIB, to support clients who are blind or have low vision. So VLR, or Vision Loss Rehabilitation staff, ask any new clients if they're interested in being connected to their local library through CELA. And if the person agrees, we here at CELA Member Services send a referral email to the local public library. And these referrals would include the person's name and contact information, including contact information for the person's designate if they have one. So what we would appreciate is if you could phone these clients to describe your library services, register them for your library if they don't have a public library card, and then register the person for CELA. It's also important to remember that you can register any patrons with print disability, so not only individuals who come through vision loss rehabilitation. So then you're done. You've not only potentially added one more registration for your library, if you sign them up for a library card, and they do need a library card in order to register with CELA, you've also connected that person to your local accessible collections and to CELA to help support their personal, professional, and educational pursuits or gains. So that's the registration process. So what happens after registration? So your role in the registration process is complete basically once you've submitted that online registration form. But I just want to describe what happens next from the perspective of the new CELA member. So the patron's account is created almost immediately after we receive the registration form that you submit. If the person provided an email address, then we send a welcome email to the patron and or their designate, if there is one. This email will include the patron's 6-digit CELA account number. If no email address is provided, we send a welcome message by direct to player or on CD. If the direct to player service was selected and the person already has a device, we send 2 popular books to the patron's device to get them started. Now, CELA contact center staff will eventually reach out by phone to any new patrons that you register, but it's a good idea to encourage them to call us if they're interested in starting to get service quickly. And new patrons can phone that toll-free contact center number. They can also log in to choose their own books if that's what they're going to do once they've been registered. Okay, so sorry here. Once I've finished the formal part of, or the slide part of the presentation, I just want to look briefly at the website. So we just have a couple more slides and then we'll go and look at the CELA website. And we'll look at the registration process. So support that we can provide, that CELA provides for patrons and libraries. So support for patrons comes through our contact center And if you are public library staff, then you would contact us at Member Services. You can call us to make changes to account information if you need help with ordering books or help with the apps and devices that play our books or any kind of question that you might have. We also offer training webinars for both patrons and libraries, and libraries are more than welcome to attend the patron webinars if they're interested. The webinars tend to focus on how to use a specific reading device or on a specialty topic, such as CELA's collection for children and teens. In terms of promoting our latest titles to all our users, we provide a printable list of a selection of titles in the For Libraries section of the website. So this can be a handy list to print out for patrons who might be looking for something new to read. And patrons can also find a more comprehensive list of our new titles in a section called What's New. And they can subscribe actually to get what's new to their device. The last item to mention is our monthly newsletter, which is called Open Book. We have a slightly different version, which is tailored to public library staff, which is called Open Book for Libraries. But both communications provide news regarding new titles that we've added, any service announcements, and upcoming webinars for that month. So we encourage you to subscribe if you haven't already, and you can subscribe to Open Book for Libraries by going to the homepage of the CELA website. So we're almost at the end, and I hope that I've been able to give you an overview of how you can offer CELA's collection to your patrons with print disabilities. We've covered the main parts of the service, excuse me, but I'd like to conclude just by describing some ways that you might be able to integrate CELA into all your main services so people with print disabilities will feel included. In terms of customer service, you could include information about CELA at circulation desks and in online information about registering for a library card. We do have free promotional materials, including postcards, CELA postcards that you can order from us, and we send them out to you free of charge. You might also consider accessible communication practices, for example, using clear fonts and plain language. In terms of staffing, you might include information about CELA, including how to answer any questions from patrons in your staff onboarding and training materials. Get staff training about all aspects of CELA service by attending a live webinar like this one, or by watching a recording, because people's schedules don't always mesh with the times that webinars are offered. You could make accessibility a standing item on staff meeting agendas, so there's a regular opportunity to share information about service changes or concerns. In terms of the collection, you can use your main CELA account to log in and download or order books in alternate formats. If this is possible for your library, it's not always possible, you could consider loaning out reading devices such as onboard Connect players or tablets with the Easy Reader app. You can purchase equipment such as Daisy players, tablets, or onboard Connect devices to loan to eligible patrons. CELA does not provide players, but accessible devices can be purchased from Humanware, which is the manufacturer of the Victor readers, and as well from the CNIB store. Outreach, this is where you can get the free promotional materials from CELA to let people in the community know what's available from your library for people with print disabilities. You might consider inviting people from organizations in your community that represent people with disabilities to present about their members and services. You could also, if you haven't already done so, put information about your accessible collections and services on your website and social media, and check and update it periodically to make sure it's accurate. You can follow CELA on Twitter, X, and Facebook while you're at it. In terms of strategy, you might consider accessibility planning, including CELA in your strategic plans. You can access your borrowing statistics of CELA materials, as I mentioned, as well as the borrowing statistics for any patrons who are registered with CELA memberships at your library. You might consider including CELA statistics in your library board reports to reflect your library's use of accessible materials. So the main goal is really to integrate CELA and all your other accessible library services as part of your overall library service, so that accessible library service isn't seen as something different or separate from library service generally. And the last slide just has our contact information. First, for library customers who have questions, they can get in touch with the contact center. And for library staff, you can contact us directly at CELA Member Services, and you've got our toll-free number and our email address there. So now what I would like to do is go to the CELA website, if I can find it. Okay, here we are. And also now, if you do have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat now. So what I have here, this is the CELA's homepage, and I'm logged in with a library test account, so as if I were a public library. So if you're going to register someone, you're just going to select the Register tab. And when you get to that page, you'll notice, excuse me, that there is an icon here that says Start Registration. This would be used by an individual with a print disability who wants to register independently for CELA. The next icon down, Patron Registration for Use by Public Library Staff. If you were going to register someone at your library, you would select that tab. It will take you to this page. And you'll notice on this page, there are some help or hopefully helpful documents. There's a guide for registering library patrons for CELA. If you've received one of those referrals that come from vision loss rehabilitation clients, there's a phone script if you're going to be calling them that you might find helpful. You can sign up for a webinar from here. This link takes you to what accessible formats are available, information about devices that patrons can use. But if you were actually going to go ahead and register the person, you would just select Register a Patron for CELA Service, and it would come up with the registration form. You notice that the first field is the public library card number, because a person must have a public library card number in order to be registered for CELA. Now I'm just going to I'm going to fill this in just so I can go to the next screen. And the date of birth is optional, except for people under 18 where it's required. So if the person you're registering does want to indicate a designate, you would select that, and then you would fill in the information about the designate. But I'm going to say in this case, okay. And then the next page of the registration, is the contact details. So the person's mailing address, etc. If the person is getting online service of any kind, they must provide an email address, preferred language of communication. So I'm not going to go through and fill out an entire form, but that's where you would find it, and also the help documents that that might be of use. So I'm going to go back and leave the registration site. So if you were wanting to order, let's say that your library has an Envoy Connect device that you're lending out, and you're wanting to what you first need to do is select titles. So I'm just going to take I'll take Margaret Atwood, do a search. Whoops, that probably didn't go through. It didn't, so I'll do that again. Okay, and then I'll do a search. When you're doing a search in our collection, you'll notice on the left-hand side of the search page, you can apply filters. So if you're a public library staff person, you know that you don't have access to Bookshare, so you might select CELA. You might also want to limit the language. So let's say you only want titles in English. You can also limit your the kind or the format. So let's say you're only wanting Daisy audio. And then so let's just take the first one. Let's say that you're going to put this book onto an Envoy Connect that you're lending out. So you want the direct to player format. You select Get It, and you should get a note saying, view your bookshelf in my account. So if you go up to the top again to the link My Account. So normally the books that I just placed or I requested the direct to player format should be on my direct to player bookshelf. With online resources, it can take a while, so it may not appear there yet. It typically might take a couple of minutes. So yeah, the one that I placed a hold on is not there yet, but it will appear shortly. And so from your direct to player bookshelf, you can transfer these books. If you're going to be lending out, say, an Envoy Connect, you can transfer the books from your direct to player bookshelf onto your Envoy Connect device and then lend them out to patrons. Okay, so thanks everyone, and hope to be speaking with you soon.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and never miss a video.